Hi, everybody. This is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.com. And I have with me a very special guest. I have Damien here, who has his own YouTube channel that he does comic reviews and gives his thoughts on comic books. Damien, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you right off the bat before we get to our topic of the day?
Right. On YouTube, I am Sleepy Reader 666. Perhaps Eric will remember to link to me in his show notes later on.
Of course I will.
And I'm all about just talking about comics on that channel. So whatever comes to my mind, it's more kind of like a comics vlog, diary, ongoing of what I'm reading, what I'm buying, what I'm thinking about comics.
And you not only do that, Damien, but I was just watching your video that you put out where you just got back from your vacation in England. And so you were talking about some of those things there. That was really cool.
Right. A little bit of real life can mix into it.
Yeah.
Here and
well,
there.
That's one of the things I like about listening to your show and others that I watch on YouTube, and I listen in the podcast that I listen to. I mean to say, I like it when people talk about what's going on in their lives, and it's not just about the comic books, even though that's why we're there for the most part. But
and mine is really just whatever I feel like. It's not. I don't have a show with a theme or any formula or approach, just whatever I'm feeling like doing, and I have time to make a video, I'll do it. But I try to stay focused on comics because that's kind of the enjoyable, fun side of my life, you know? So that's what I want to put up on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason I like your broadcast, Damien, so much is that we seem to have somewhat similar tastes, and we have a similar approach to the topics that we throw out there on the interwebs. So I enjoy that. I like talking with you. And today we decided that we would talk about some of our favorite independent comics. So
right.
As the title says, it's our top 5, but really, it's just kind of our favorites. Probably for now is probably the more proper way to put it.
Right, top 5 of what we're reading right now. So it could change when a comic gets bad or a new one comes out that catches our fancy.
In fact,
paid to be consistent.
That's right. In fact, Damien, when I first put together my notes and I made my list, I just wrote down the first things that came to mind. I figured those would be the ones that are my favorite independent comics, and so I didn't officially rank them in my list, but in my mind, I kind of had them ranked a little bit. But and like I said, the notes that I made, and I'll just briefly flash that on the video for people to see. Handwritten notes, which I normally don't do because I can't read my handwriting after I'm done, but we'll see how this goes. But I had one book kind of at the bottom of this 5 list that is now I'm thinking of number 4 because I read a new issue of it after I compiled my notes. So things change.
Right. And there is one on my list that I haven't read the issue that came out this week because I haven't got my comics this week yet. Hopefully it will stay roughly where it is at that point. I limited myself. Like I almost put on one of the Young Animals books, but then I decided that's not an indie book. It says DC right on the cover, even though it feels like an indie book.
Okay.
And I didn't include things that I'm following in trade. I decided to limit it just as a way to keep things simpler, limit it to things I'm picking up on a monthly basis.
Yeah, ongoing stuff. That's right. There's a few independent comics that I get in trade as well. Morning Glories is the one that's popping to the top of my brain right now. That I absolutely love it. But I did not include that as either in my deliberations.
Right. Yeah, like I get, what's that Rick Remender one that everyone loves about the school for assassins? I get that in trade.
Deadly Class?
Deadly Class. And I like that, but I'm way behind on that. And I'm just not going to fiddle around with that. I actually get all of Rick Remender's indie books in trade. and I get all of Jonathan Hickman's books in trade. So those guys, poor guys, are probably crying right now as they listen to this.
Well, speaking of Hickman, I can totally see getting his books in trade. Not just in terms of the readability, but if you consider his latest book that's out right now, the price tag for the single issue may be somewhat prohibitive for some people to get on a month-to-month basis. So, yeah.
Yeah, when you add in price, and just when I discover certain people just read better in trade for me, then I might as well. Mm-hmm. Hickman is the biggest case for me. I just enjoy him more in trade.
Yeah. Okay, well, Damien, shall we get started and go through our list?
So should we start from the bottom of our list, and you do 5, then I'll do 5, and so on?
Well, how about this? Well, let's start at the bottom of our list, but let's you do yours, and then I'll do mine, and then we'll just go back and forth until we get to the top one. And just to let everybody know, this is not going to be it's not intended to be an in-depth discussion of each title. It's more of an overview. We're going to give our thoughts about what we like about it, I presume, and maybe some things that we don't like about it, and we'll just have a conversation about these titles, because I'm sure that Damien has some things on his list that I am not reading, because I know he reads quite a bit of the independent comics out there, probably more than I do. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Damien has to say about some of these books. So take it away, Damien.
Shall I go to my number 5?
Sure.
My number 5 is Saga, which 3 years ago might have been my number 1. It's the comic that I started to take for granted. With the awesome art by Fiona Staples and the ever reliable, wacky, clever, and highly readable scripts by Brian K. Vaughan. Mm-hmm. Almost called him Brian Michael Bendis. I don't know why. But I don't know how he would take that. I was taking Saga so for granted that I was kind of losing interest in it a little bit. I was just used to it every month, or as often as it comes out each year, maybe 10 times a year. Just sort of consistently continuing this interesting soap opera. But the last 2 or 3 issues somehow have grabbed my interest more tightly again. And it feels it felt like it had slowed down a bit, and it feels like it's speeding up more now to me. And some of the elements, some of the interesting characters are having more interesting stuff to do, like the Will, who is no longer the Will. He's lost his name. Right. And Prince Robot. And there's some weird sci-fi stuff going. I can't remember if it's this issue I'm holding here or the one before it, where there's a giant planet with rings around it that also looks like a baby or fetus's head.
I think you might be one issue ahead of me there, Damien. I haven't seen that yet.
So that was it must have been in issue 40. I'm holding issue 41. Anyway, there was enough. My interest level has spiked again with Saga. And I'm very happy for that, because for me, Saga's kind of kicked off the current resurgence of great indies, and I think encouraged tons of creators to go out there and make their own comics, especially Image Comics.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up about Saga. So Saga is not on my list, but it is very much one of my favorite books each and every month. Why did I not put that on my list then? I think for the same reason that you brought what you brought up was, it's been out there for a while. Although most of the books half of the books on my list have been out on the shelves for a little while. But yeah, what is it about long running titles? You lose interest to some degree. But Saga's a weird one, and you could tell I'm struggling with trying to express what I'm trying to think about it, because it is like I said, it's one of my favorite titles each and every month. Fiona Staples' art is incredible every issue. So why did I not put that on there? I'm not sure. Maybe because the more recent stuff that's going on in the story hasn't been getting me excited, like you said too. I guess I just really hadn't thought about it until you brought it up.
Maybe have been a little less exciting recently, and we're so familiar with Saga after 41 issues. It's kind of, there is a certain, even though it's original unto itself, there's a certain formula that Saga follows with each issue, with kind of a shocking moment of one kind or another, sometimes sexual, sometimes something else, something gross, and then some kind of revelation and some little twist, and then some end page that that creates a kind of emotional cliffhanger that makes you want to read the next issue. But it is kind of predictable in its own way at this point, even though it's done so well.
I can see that. Okay. But
I think when it started, I had never seen art like Fiona Staples' art.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really impressed by it. And now I take her for granted, which is unfair because she's still one of the best artists out there. But I don't stop and think about her art anymore. She does the colors and the inks and everything herself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, issue by issue, it's just makes a great read for the visual storytelling. But it is something I've started to take for granted.
The whole idea of long running comics not getting, I guess, the recognition anymore compared to when they first launched. That's long been a conversation that I've noticed from creators on Twitter for the ones that I follow. There's a couple in particular that seem to bring that up a lot. I'm thinking of Tim Seeley.
Tim Seeley, right? He has a lot of problems with the thing that everyone used to talk about and no one talks about
right
anymore.
So, and Revival is that the book Revival in particular that I'm thinking of, which I have when it first came out. I did talk about that one quite a bit. But yeah, it's been a while since I've talked about it. I haven't talked about Saga all that much since it first launched. So yeah, I think there's probably some merit to that observation from the creators. That we're all, people like us who like to talk about comics. We're always looking at the shiny over there, and talking about that. And there's always a new shiny.
There always is. There's so much new stuff coming out.
Yeah.
And it's more fun to talk about something you haven't already talked about. So when
that's true.
Have this internet and podcasts and YouTube where there's so much conversation, you're always looking at the next thing. I do think if you have the point of view of someone who's just a trade collector, that it's probably wonderful that there's so many trades of Saga and so many trades of Rachel Rising, which also had that problem. But if you just discovered Rachel Rising now and you say, wow, there's 7 trades or whatever it is, that's very exciting that there's so many.
Mm-hmm.
But those aren't the people talking so much about things.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
So what's your number 5?
My number 5, which was my number 4, and it's too bad it's not number 4 because it's actually letter 44 from Oni Press. So this is by Charles Soule, Alberto Albuquerque, Guy Major, Dan Jackson, and Crank. And what I was holding up, this is issue number 1 of letter 44. So this has been out since 2013. There are, as of this recording, there are 28 issues that I have of this comic. And just briefly, in case people don't know what letter 44 is about, it's about you can see the guy there in the front. He is the new president of the United States. And think of him as the Barack Obama coming in after the George W. Bush presidency, because what this is about is this new president comes in and finds out that the old president, the outgoing president, who was very unpopular at the end of his term for starting some wars that we couldn't pay for and ignoring a lot of domestic issues because of those wars. Turns out that he wasn't doing it just to be a warmonger. He was doing it because the United States found out that there are aliens out in the asteroid belt near Jupiter doing something. They're building something. And so the former president was very concerned about that and started these wars to help pay for advances in technology and weaponry to prepare for a possible invasion or an attack from these aliens. They also sent out a ship, basically, to go out to Jupiter and figure out what those aliens were all about, or what they were up to, and then report back. Well, then of course the election happened. This new guy shows up, and he gets the letter from the previous president, and that's why you get the title Letter 44, because it's it's a tradition for our presidents, our outgoing presidents, to leave a letter for the incoming president. And if you've been following the transition recently here between President Obama and President Trump, apparently Obama also left Trump a letter, so it's continuing that tradition, and that's part of what this comic is about.
Imagine Trump versus the aliens.
It crossed my mind what that would be like. So,
so that it's not as long running as Saga, but that's been around quite a while, and probably a lot less chatter about it online now than when it first came out.
Well, and it's like I said, it's from Oni Press, and so I tend to think that the smaller publishers don't get as much coverage. I could be wrong about that, but I don't see a lot of stuff online. I don't hear a lot of podcasts or see a lot of videos that talk about this particular comic. So, but it's been, like I said, I have 28 issues, and I when I first started getting, I thought, oh, this might be a fun comic to read for 6 or 12 issues, and I'll probably lose interest. As does happen, but this book has been, despite the art style, which I'm not a great fan of, but
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, it's not. Here's some pictures here for the video. It's not bad. It's certainly not bad art. What I object to is that the artist tends to draw all the faces kind of the same, with minor differences so that you can tell the people apart, but there's not a lot of variation there. Right. But what makes up for that is the story as told by Soule and the artists involved as a whole, because it's kept me interested, and mostly it's not. I focus a lot on the alien aspect, but what I really liked about this comic early on, and they've kind of dropped that off in the latter, 6, maybe 8 issues, is the political stuff back on Earth between the president and actually the former president who tries to he makes a play for power in the course of the story. And so there's this conflict between the two men, between the United States, and it turns out to be Germany who has allied with the former president. So that kind of stuff really intrigued me. But like I said, they've kind of backed away from that and focused more on the aliens, what they're up to, why they're doing what they're doing, and the impending doom that's coming.
So, this is a book that I bought the first 5 issues of. And then at some point when I wanted to prune my list, I said, this is interesting, but I don't love the art. I'm glad to hear you're still liking it, because this will be one of those that I will enjoy someday in trade. I'll when it's all done, and I think it's very close to done, right?
That's funny you bring that up.
Sorry?
Well, I was just looking at the latest previews, and it says that issue number 31 is the mid-season finale, and I thought it was actually coming to an end here pretty soon. So it's coming to an end, but just for a little while.
So anyway, when it does end, if it still sounds good, I might get the individual trades, but. I was turned off by the art, and so when looking for stuff to cut at some point, as we all do, It's like we said, there's always new stuff coming out. I let that one go.
Yep.
I'm surprised. I mean, in a way, I'm surprised it survived as long as it did.
Actually, I am too,
because of that art.
I am too, and not for the art necessarily, but I don't know. I like I said, I feel like the book is just not as appreciated, perhaps. So I'm surprised it's gone on for this long. but I'm glad it has been.
Well, I was very surprised at that choice. So you've already surprised me.
All right.
Shall I like my number 4 book? I don't actually have a copy of it with me to hold up. Is Kill or Be Killed by Brubaker and Sean Phillips. There, you got it right there. So I'm really enjoying it a lot, and that's why it's at number 4. I think if the Fade Out were still going, their previous series together, that would probably be number 2 or number 1.
Oh yeah.
So I'm loving Kill or Be Killed, but it's not my absolute favorite Brubaker and Phillips book. I think Phillips is really knocking it out of the park. I'm still not, and it could change. Its status in my mind could change as the series progresses. It's already gotten better from issue 1 up to whatever issue I've read so far, 5 or 4.
I think 4.
Because I haven't read the issue that came out this week yet.
Oh, say yeah.
5. So I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. It's a little hard to predict what is in Brubaker's mind to do with these elements that he set into motion.
Yeah,
half horror movie, half vigilante exploitation movie from the 70s kind of influenced thing. So yeah, I don't have a lot more to say about it than that. I really enjoy it. I love the art. I love the story. Like I said, is very intriguing. I think the reason why it isn't quite as high as the Fade Out would be is that the characters don't seem as rich to me. They're more in their early 20s, and the characters in the Fade Out were in their 30s and 40s. But I mean, people in their early 20s can be just as rich. They just don't feel as rich characters to me, maybe because they're closer to exploitation movie characters.
Yeah, I could see that. And it's so hard, the Fade Out was such a good book, and the world was so rich. I was really disappointed to see that one end. I honestly thought that they could have kept doing that for at least a couple more years, and then suddenly the book was done. So, but I did show in the video. I have Kill or Be Killed here, and it's on my list. It's actually number 3. So I'll talk about it now since we're talking about it.
Okay.
So Kill or Be Killed, like I said, this is, or you mentioned, it's Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, Elizabeth Breitweiser, who's doing the colors.
Right. And she should be mentioned. She's definitely one of the best colorists around. Yeah.
Well, this team, I read whatever Brubaker, Phillips, and Breitweiser put out. I will read. I don't care what it is. Because quite honestly, when I read the solicitation for Kill or Be Killed, I was not as excited about it as I was about the Fade Out, and that could be that because I was so enamored with the Fade Out that something else didn't look quite as interesting. But I like how, Damien, how did you describe it? It was how did you say, movie exploitative or
cross between like a horror exploitation movie and a 70s vigilante movie?
Yes.
What's the famous one with? But there was a lot of movies like that. Right.
And yeah, so this book is that's a perfect explanation of this book, because the main character here that people who are looking at the video can see, who's wearing the mask, his name is Dylan. Dylan he's a bit of a schmuck, right? He's this sad sack character who decides to end his own life and botches it. Maybe, or he was saved by this entity, this demonic looking entity, or was he?
Right. Is he crazy?
yeah, is it mental illness, or is this demon real? But from Dylan's perspective, this demon tells him that the demon saved Dylan's life so that Dylan could kill other people, and basically the demon gets the souls or the life force or whatever it is. And so Dylan has to do this at least once a month, or he's racked with so much pain and the threat from the demon that the demon will kill him. And Dylan has, after his suicide attempt, decided that he actually wants to live. So there you go.
Right.
Just real quick, Damien, Jack in the chat says that Sean Phillips' art is the best it's ever looked in Jack's opinion. And I would agree. I think Phillips gets better and better every book that he works on. And
Right.
and speaking of that, I just want to show this.
I mean, his style is always recognizable, but he's not repeating himself. It's not like the fade out done over again. There's something
exactly
different in the layouts and the lighting. It really captures that. What I, as a kid, used to go to New York City in the 70s. It captures that 70s New York City, even though I think it's supposed to be set in modern times.
Oh, okay.
That way to me.
Yeah, see, I don't have that perspective, so it just looks like generic big city to me.
Uh-huh.
but it's beautifully done.
Drawn New York cities I've seen in a long time.
Okay, good. Now one of the things I want to mention about the art, though, is they're trying something new, and I saw an interview with Brubaker talking about how he and Phillips wanted to do this layout is the word I'm looking for.
Right.
So what I'm showing in the video here is you got your typical comic panels on here, but you also have this side panel which is just dialogue. It's just on black text on a white strip of the page. So it's
what do you think about that?
I like it. I actually do like that layout, because you get a lot of the internal dialogue of Dylan's, but it's not filling up the art with captions or word balloons. And so you get a lot of, like I said, a lot of the internal dialogue of him. You get a lot of the sense of the character coupled with that panel there, and you get a nice the word escaped me. You get a nice blending of the two elements, even though they're so separated on the side there. I really like it.
See,
what do you think of that?
That is one of my less favorite things about the book. I mean, it looks good, but I find that I'm reading the text and then I'm turning my head to look at the picture, and then I'm reading the text and then I'm turning my head to look at the picture. And so it feels like I'm reading an illustrated book rather than a comic book.
Okay. But they only do it a little bit.
Right. And I don't hate it, but I don't love it. It doesn't add to my love of the book.
Okay. Well, I could see maybe if they did it too much, of course, I think it would become irritating. But right now, for me, they're doing it just enough that it makes it interesting and also breaks up the usual pattern of a comic book for me. So I guess visually, I still find it somewhat interesting. Now, when 10 issues on,
visually, it is an interesting layout. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm just being picky there. It's just one of the little touches that I prefer, makes me prefer the fade out to this one.
One other thing that I wanted to mention
is the difference in the characters between the two books, I think.
Oh yeah. We should have done this conversation months ago, Damien, when we could have talked about the fade out more.
Well, we can always do this again, or we can do favorite indie books of the past few years.
That's right. We'll have to do that. Comic Crack said, I enjoy that part of the book, to be honest. It breaks up the book a bit, and I enjoy the layout. It's like watching a foreign film and reading subtitles. I hadn't thought about it that way.
That's a good way to describe it. It is a bit like that. And subtitles kind of change your experience of watching a movie.
Oh, yeah.
sometimes it actually makes the movie seem deeper and more complex.
See now,
and other times it's irritating.
See, and that's usually how I feel about subtitle when I'm watching movies where I have to have subtitles, because I find myself staring at the bottom of the screen to read what's going on instead of focusing on the action on the screen. But I guess I don't get that from that same feel from the layout in Kill or Be Killed.
And in a static page, you have as much time as you want to flip back and forth between the text and the pictures. You're not missing something by reading the text.
One more thing I wanted to mention about Kill or Be Killed. Damien, did you just a few seconds or a few minutes ago mention Death Wish?
Yes, Death Wish. That's what I meant to say. I mentioned the actor from Death Wish, but I couldn't remember the title.
Yeah. So one of the nice things about getting Brubaker and Phillips's books is monthly, the single issues, is that you get these great articles in the back. So the added material, you get these articles by various people. And this in the first issue was about the Death Wish movies. And all of the articles that they include have something to do thematically with the work itself. So I really like that.
Right. And I need to read more of those. I read them more in the Fade Out, I guess, than I have in Kill or Be Killed. In the Fade Out, I'll always remember the one about Cary Grant and his psychedelic drug use.
Oh my gosh, that was a good one. Damien, we need to do an examination of the Fade Out together, I think.
Uh-huh.
We obviously love it.
We could do a podcast or a video on that sometime. That would be cool.
Okay.
Okay, so we just confused things because we went from my number 4 to your number 3. You want to say what your number 4 is now, so we don't get too further off field?
Okay, well, sure. My number 4 is Black Hammer. You got that too.
It's somewhere else on my list.
Okay. Well, maybe the whole top 5 thing.
It's number 3 on my list, so that evens out.
Okay, good. All right. Do you want to flop our 4?
So tell me about Black Hammer and why you chose it.
Okay, Black Hammer. So this came out in 2015. I've read up to issue 6. This is from Dark Horse. This is by Jeff Lemire, Dean Ormston, Dave Stewart, and Todd Klein. The premise of this book is that this group of superheroes dealt with a universe shattering event and ended up in what appears to be sort of another dimension or pocket universe or something along those same lines. And they can't get out. And we know they can't get out because we see the reality from which they came as well. And the daughter of, I believe it's the daughter of one of the heroes, Black Hammer, ends up contacting them, coming to that dimension in issue 6.
In issue 6, the one I'm holding up.
Yeah. But
she is appearing in her astronaut suit. I think it's an astronaut suit.
Something like that, yeah. But okay, so that's the kind of the premise of the book. Right. What I love about this book is its celebration of Silver Age DC, essentially. So these characters here, they're very analogous to many DC characters. I mean, there's some other
right
influences, but basically we're talking about kind of like a Silver Age Justice League type group. And
right,
how
or not just Justice League though, kind of some of the odder B characters, like a fill-in for an Adam Strange type of character.
Right.
Mystery type of character. So it definitely touches on all kinds of cool Silver Age DC kind of feeling stuff. Various
heroic tropes of the Silver Age. But what it's not just that aspect. Other things that I really find interesting is how these characters, now they've been here. Damien, do you remember how long have they been there now? Trapped in that little universe?
I can't remember, but I sort of assume it's been years and years.
Let's see, because they they celebrate.
I don't have the first issue in front of me.
They celebrate the anniversary at the end of issue 1. Oh boy, I should have. Nah, I'm not finding it, so I'm gonna move on. Anyway,
Well,
so they've been there for a while,
right?
And we have 10 years. It's right on page 1. It's 10 years. They're celebrating 10 years, or not celebrating. They're commemorating 10 years being at the farm. But this other world that they're in, which looks very much like our own, we have, there's a sheriff that's a character in there. There's a waitress that one of the main characters, what's his name? Can't remember the main guy's name now.
Right,
Abraham.
One of them
Abraham
is dating
Slam.
her.
Yeah, they're dating. So it's a lot of just human stuff with these superheroic characters involved.
And no one in the town knows who they are or anything.
Right.
They've kept their identities hidden for all those 10 years.
Right. But like I said, they can't leave. There's some sort of barrier keeping them in. What I don't know about this book is if the townsfolk that they interact with, are they actually, I don't know, are they part of our universe or is this some sort of parallel world?
Right. That's not answered yet, is it?
Town? Yeah, there's a lot of unanswered questions 6 issues in on this series.
I think the woman Abraham is dating talks about let's go somewhere else, like on a little trip together, and he says he can't do it, and he can't explain to her why. But it would be interesting if it is if they are still in their world, can they make friends with someone in the town and send them as a messenger out to go get help, from other superheroes or something? But it seems like maybe they're in a sort of separate reality.
Mm-hmm. That's my impression as well. But like I said, there's just so many unanswered questions about it. And those are not the things that are keeping me with the book. Although, they are interesting enough to, pique my interest. But it's really about the interactions between the main characters and the townsfolk that they interact with. I find that really fascinating.
Right. Well, for me, it's a weave of their Silver Age background and their mundane current existence, both of which are interesting to me. And I kind of like the slow pace. I'm not in any rush to get answers. It's not about the answers to me so much as the atmosphere.
The journey.
And I wouldn't always say that about comics. I can be quite picky about a comic that's too slow paced.
Yeah, I totally agree.
This one works just right. And the artwork and the color is so awesome and so unique. So it both evokes the Silver Age, but it has a very different style.
Yes. And
it's almost like Bernie Wrightston meets an indie comic style.
Well, yeah, and precisely. So I wanted to, you had held up issue number 6, and I think that's what you're referring to. And Damien, I know, having watched one of your more recent videos, that you were not all that keen on issue number 6. Is that accurate?
I still liked it, but it was my least favorite of the first 6 issues we've got.
Yeah, because
Did you like it more than I did then?
I loved it. I thought it was great. So I'm showing the first page. Image. Yeah, I'm showing the first page of issue number 6, and it's very much, you said what, House of Mystery earlier?
House of Mystery, but this is the Cabin of Horrors.
Yeah, exactly. So that they are this issue focused a lot on, what's her name, Madame Dragonfly. Yeah. So she's
Madame Dragonfly.
She's your House of Mystery type witch host.
Right. Usually the host of the stories. Yeah. But she has her own background story that we learn here, how she ended up getting trapped in the Cabin of Horrors.
Right.
Which is still a mystery itself that needs to be. So now we have the mystery of why they're where they are. We have the mystery as to why she is attached to this cabin and what happened to the promise of magical trades. You do this and I'll save your child. But so far, her child was never brought back to life.
Mm-hmm. Or at least as far as she knows.
Right, as far as she knows.
But no, Damien, I really like this kind of deviation from the first 5 issues in the way that the story was told, because and also
Right.
it really it really reminds me, it really strikes me as kind of commentary on comics, because it's styled so much after like a House of Mystery type comic. So it's a bit meta.
Right. It's a bit meta, but it's, despite its kind of dark and indie look, it's very loving of those Silver Age tropes.
Yes.
I don't think it's at all, it's not saying there's anything wrong with them or anything wrong with the people who loved them. He's, totally in our camp, so to speak, in loving the nostalgia of all of that.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time being totally modern and grown up about his approach to it.
Yes, exactly. It's a great way to put it. There's no cynicism here. It's pure love for the medium and the characters and titles, I guess, of that age. So,
yeah.
But I
Jackie
understand.
O in the comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jackie O in the comments mentions the annual came out this week. So again, I haven't got it yet because of weather delays. I'm assuming the annual won't speak directly to the current storyline, but will give us more background on other characters. At least that's what I'm hoping for. I know it's filled with guest artists and stuff.
Yeah. Let's see here. Comic Crack asked, do you guys think the overall mystery will ever get revealed, or is that such a big part of what they are trying to say overall? And in terms of mystery, I guess, why are they there? Why are they trapped there? Is
right.
Well, okay, let's talk about that for a second, Damien, because if they ever can leave, then what's the story about?
Right. Well, this experience has changed them, right? They're no longer really superheroes. They have the memories of being superheroes, but they're kind of, well, most of them are old, slightly demented people at this point. So I think, the mystery as to why they're there and how they out is, but I think more interesting is what it's done to them and what their lives are like.
Yes.
Contrast between their Silver Age and now their old age, or their, it almost feels in a way for me personally, a metaphor of how wonderful you thought life was going to be when you were in high school, say, anticipating, and then what life is actually like 20, 30 years down the road. It's not horrible or anything, but it's not this glorious smashing of bad guys and all of that. It's more about the everyday.
Well, it's a much more intimate story, a much more internal story than
right.
An action-oriented adventure. So
right, internal versus external.
Yes,
perfect way to look at it.
Those are really the kind of stories I love the most. I mean, I appreciate a good superhero brawl fest every once in a while, but I really like the internal nature of it. Yeah. I did want to mention real quick. There was a comment here from Jared back when we first started talking about this book, who says, I'm done with Black Hammer. I just read a few digital issues to check it out. I know the answers to the questions they're asking won't be interesting. It's well done, though. Yeah.
Obviously, it's a matter of taste and does not fit Jared's taste, but it does fit yours and mine.
Well, he also said earlier, I missed this, I'm a little tired of the lost concept of the plot being what the hell is going on in the story. I can see that. Yeah.
I'm totally in sympathy with that. And I think in most cases I would not have sympathy, but somehow the combination of the Silver Age backdrop and the art being so great and just the pacing of the writing being so wonderful and all the characters feeling so true, I'm happy not worrying about the mystery part.
So far, yeah. And I know, well, I don't know. I read somewhere, actually, I think, Damien, I think it was from the comments on your video when you talked about this book before. I think somebody said something about how Lemire sees this as a finite story, but he's having so much fun. I'm paraphrasing. He's having so much fun with it that he might extend it some. So obviously he has an end in sight. So we you know, this won't be around for years. In other words,
I really enjoy being with these characters and in this world. So I personally would want him to revisit them later in some other setting. But obviously, if you view it in terms of a mystery that needs solving, it needs to come to an end at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Or and you don't want mysteries to drag out as long as they did on the TV show Lost. But,
well, okay.
Or Morning Glories.
Right. Which is it's lost in comic book form, I know. But I'll just throw this out there. I loved Lost, and I didn't care about getting all the answers. So that's just an alternate opinion about that.
I only lasted 2 seasons on Lost and just got tired of it.
It got so much better, Damien. Anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, I can always revisit it. That's the wonders of modern life.
Yes. And finally, Comic Crack has this to say. I thought was really actually a good observation. Readers and fans putting heroes into a specific time and place and not willing to let them go. A little too deep, possibly. But very apropos. That's actually that. I think that adds to the meta aspect of this book.
Right.
That's a great observation.
Well, and maybe what Lemire is doing here is he is examining his psyche as a longtime comic book fan without being obvious not without talking about himself, but is in fact deep inside his own mind looking at these comic books. And those of us who happen to share his perspective are enjoying it. And maybe Jared, who isn't enjoying it, just doesn't have that same sense of feeling about things, about these particular things.
I think, Damien, too, I keep referring back to your other video, but I think you said something about this being Jeff Lemire's best work that you've encountered?
That I've encountered, because I have, for instance, not read Sweet Tooth. I've not read Essex County. So I've mostly read his DC work. I read Trillium. I read superhero work, and then I read Trillium, and I read, what was the one about the kids that find the superhero's body? Which seems related to this thematically, but is not nearly as good of a comic.
And I would agree with you about my experience with Jeff Lemire's work. This is probably the best thing that I've read. But I have a limited Lemire experience.
Well, it would be fun for us to revisit Black Hammer when it ends and see if we still feel the same.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Will it be the new comic book Lost?
Right. I loved Trillium for about the first 3 issues. That was only like an 8-issue series or 6. Anyway. Okay, so now we are up to, because we just covered my number 3, we're already up to number 2.
Yes. So you go ahead with your number.
I'm guessing that you don't read my number 2.
Okay.
It is Autumn Lands.
By Kurt Busiek and Benjamin Dewey, and colors by Jordi Belair. It's the I saw Busiek and Dewey at a con talking about it, and its origins are in Busiek's desire to do a Commandy comic and not being allowed to by DC.
Okay.
And being inspired by the cult science fiction novel called Dying Earth by Jack Vance. And Dying Earth, I'm very familiar with Dying Earth. And so as soon as he said that, it was like, wow, yeah, I can totally see it. Dying Earth is about Earth millions of years in the future where science has been around so long, it's just like magic now. And humanity has kind of, they know the world is ending. You know, they know they're on such an old, humanity is just kind of tired and baroquely decadent and such. So this is a bit different because it's animals, but we're starting to see some baroquely decadent humans show up. Basic plot is it's this far future Earth where there's only animals and magic is dying. And they have this myth of the champion who brought magic to the world. So they use a huge magic spell to bring the champion to their time because they think he can revive. So there's dogs and ostriches and owls and all these humanized animals drawn fantastically by Benjamin Dewey. Unfortunately, the issue I have in front of me actually mostly has human-looking figures, but you can see this dog here. He's one of the main characters. Anyway, so they bring the champion forward through time, and he turns out to be a human being, and they've never seen a human being before.
Oh, okay.
And he doesn't at all match their kind of King Arthur myth of this wonderful champion. He's this.
Well, he is human after all.
He's a veteran of some brutal futuristic war with all his strategies and techniques are just tricking people and fighting dirty and being unfair and stuff like that. And he doesn't at all care. He doesn't know what they're talking about bringing the magic back to the world and stuff.
Huh. And
so he and this dog character end up. We're basically at the end of the second arc now. I think they're going to wander the world trying to figure out what's going on. And we've just learned that there are some humans who none of the animal people know about, who either control the technology or the higher level of magic. But it's more clearly technology now. So we are unraveling the layers of the mystery of this far future world. And every issue on the second and third page has the opening pages of a pulp science fiction story. Relates directly, in this case, it's very sexual. Sometimes relates directly and sometimes indirectly to what's going on in that issue. And sometimes seems to be a pulp novel written in our time, and sometimes seems to be a pulp novel written in this future time written by the animal people. I find it fascinating. No issue has missed a beat for me yet. And I'm really enjoying exploring it all. I love Kamandi. I love science fiction. I appreciate the novel Dying Earth. So all of that helps me a lot. But I think a lot of people who like science fiction and fantasy can enjoy this. And there's now, I think the second trade is just about to come out. So the two trades together make a great read. So that's my number 2.
So, of course, I knew about Autumn Lands when it was coming out because it's Kurt Busiek. Whatever he comes out with, I at least pay attention to.
Right.
But for some reason, I decided to pass on it, and I'm not sure why. Other than maybe the description of the book didn't excite me. But after listening to you, Damien, I'm going to go buy the trades because it's Busiek.
Like you say, it hits all of my buttons. I don't know if it hits yours.
Well, but like you said, so it's Kurt Busiek who has a great track record, personally for the stuff that I've read of his, and the way you described it in terms of it being Busiek's Kamandi book,
right?
and just the whole, I like a talking animal book, every once in a while, and I think maybe that's why I kind of passed. I was like, well, a talking animal book, really? Do I want to read something like that? and as I recall, it wasn't actually called Autumn Lands at the beginning, right? It was called Tooth and Claw.
Tooth and Claw, but they had a copyright issue and had to change the title.
Yeah, which I think is much better title, but
right. Autumn Lands doesn't evoke a lot. It makes sense when you realize he was inspired by Dying Earth. Autumn Lands kind of, towards the end of the seasons, heading towards winter, But unless you sort of understand that, for most people, the title Autumn Lands will mean nothing.
But still, it evokes a certain fantasy aspect,
right?
Which ties into talking animals, even though this could be a scientific or a future type story where animals have developed the power of speech or whatever. But yeah, your description of it makes me want to read that book now. I think maybe they should hire you to write their solicitations.
I should be a comic book PR person.
And it looks like we have a few people, at least in the chat room here or the chat, that agree with you that it's a
right.
good book.
Yeah, Jared Osborne says it kicks ass. So I know he is a steady reader of it. But then Terrence Comic Crack read a few issues and he didn't stick with it. So, it may not have captured his fancy the way it did mine.
Well, like I said,
talking animals, I am normally, worried about. But there is no cutesy factor here with the talking animals. And that
And Benjamin Dewey just does an amazing job of giving these animals both human and animal qualities at the same time.
Mm. Yeah, I'm looking forward to at least trying that first trade out now.
And it is, the first trade is in one of those, $9.99 trades. So, and if you get it online, you get it, far less than that. So it's almost the cost of a single comic book issue.
Which that's a whole other topic, single versus waiting for trades.
Right.
Especially since you and I and some other people on Twitter recently had discussions about DC upping the price of their single issues, some of their single issues.
Right.
Yeah.
And will that lead to even the rest of the cheaper issues going up?
Right.
I have to say, I don't know how much longer they can do it, but Autumn Lands is still a $2.99 book.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And part of what they've done is they use even less paper. They have no ads in the back. It's just the story begins on the first page with the summary of the creators. And then on the last page is the last page. And then there's a coming next issue kind of thing.
Huh.
And that's it.
How many pages is it?
So it's a bit thinner. Sorry?
How many pages is it? Is it a 20-page book or
I think it's 20 pages of actual story. Yeah. And a lot of image books are 22 pages of actual story. Yeah. So it's a little bit thinner for that too.
It's funny. It's okay. So one of the things I did, Damien, for some reason, when I was preparing for this talk, I was noting the number of pages we were getting for the price we're paying, the cover price we're paying for these books. And so far, so I have a Dark Horse and Oni, 1, 2, 3 image books, and most of them are 32 pages for $3.99.
But what is 32 pages? It depends. To me, it only matters how many actual pages of comics there are. If the 32 pages include ads, that doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just counting.
So when I get anal about it and do my math, I count how many pages of actual comic book story there are. I could include the letters page and such.
Yeah. But
I think I'd have to count here, but the last time I looked, books like Saga gave you 22 pages of story. I think most Dark Horse books are 22 pages, but I'd have to, with the image books, it probably varies widely book by book.
Mm. Well, one of the books on my list is very different from that 22 or 32 pages model.
Saga has 4 pages of a letters page, so if you value that gives you, some extra. And Saga is still $2.99 also.
Well, and so I was going to just bring that up too. I mentioned the back matter and Kill or Be Killed.
Right, that's a lot of extra value there.
You get not only do you get and one of the other books that I'm going to talk about has something similar, but you get letters pages, you get commentary from the author or artists, and in the case of a Brubaker Phillips book, you get these extra articles at the end too. So, for at least for like Kill or Be Killed, where you're paying $4. Where it's actually the last issue I just looked at was only 26 pages. You get all that back matter, and if you enjoy that, reading that kind of stuff, right, I think you're getting your money's worth.
Yeah, and something like Kill or Be Killed comes on very nice paper.
Yeah,
too. Whereas when you buy a Marvel or DC comic, they're on this flimsiest of paper.
Yeah, in fact, now that you mention that, I'm thumbing through some of the issues I have here just to see what the paper quality is, and they're all really good. So yeah,
like the paper quality on Autumn Lands is much better than I just thumbing through Black Hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Dark Horse comics are kind of in the middle in terms of quality. They're a little better than Marvel and DC, but they don't match. And I feel like Oni comics also. Well, I almost showed my next choice, but Oni comics also come on better paper. But it's image usually gives you the best value. Whatever the cover price, they give you a lot of pages on very good paper.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Terrence, I'm sorry, I didn't know Comic Crack was Terrence. Isn't there a new comic company going back to newsprint to offer cheap books? And yes, I can't remember the name of the company now.
Yeah, they're one of the very small ones.
Yes.
And they're going to do $1.99 comics on newsprint coming up soon.
Yes. So yeah, I saw that, and I tweeted out there when I saw that I'm gonna buy that book, or books. It depends on what I don't remember exactly what they're offering, but I'm gonna support that because why not?
Right.
I grew up reading newsprint books. Why
put it on
can't
my poll? Because what if they really suck?
Well, that's true.
But if they're on the shelves, I'll probably sample the first issues for sure.
Well, for me, because the way I get my books, it's very easy for me to try things out like that because it's cheap. Oh, but Jared says, but newsprint isn't actually cheaper. If you don't think Marvel is using the cheaper paper available, you haven't been paying attention. But, if you don't think Marvel is using the cheapest paper available, well, I believe that based on the flimsiness of their books.
I have heard at times people say that newsprint is no longer that cheap, but this company is going to be putting out cheap books on newsprint. So we'll see what that means.
But yeah, that begs the question then, are they doing it for publicity only, or because if the demand for newsprint is no longer what it was, and I'm sure it isn't, it would be more expensive. So, I had not considered that.
Maybe they found a source of cheap newsprint.
That's true.
I mean, it is cheaper paper. It's crappier paper.
Yeah, and I didn't get the sense that this was a publishing initiative that they would be doing from now on. It seemed more like we're going to do this special thing and give you cheap books.
Right. I think they're launching. They already have other comics out, which I've never read. I just can't even remember the name of the company.
I can't either. Yeah,
they're very obscure.
All right.
So this may get them a lot of attention. It'd be great to discover that their comics are good, but I'm holding my breath I'm not holding my breath. I'm expecting their comics to be good.
All right.
A bit off track.
Yes, sorry. It's a little sidetrack there.
Where were we? As a laser tightly focused podcast. People have expectations.
Yes. It's my turn, right? You did Autumn Lands. Okay.
Or number 2.
My number 2 is, you mentioned Jonathan Hickman earlier, Damien. My number 2 at the moment is The Black Monday Murders.
Well, I'm glad to hear you still like it because I'm looking forward to getting the trade.
Okay. Well, okay. So Black Monday Murders, this just started late last year. From Image, Jonathan Hickman is the writer. Tom Coker, Michael Garland, and Russ Wooten doing the rest of the work on the book. I have read 4 issues. This is a 48-page comic for $5. It's a $4.99 cover price, Damien. I think waiting for the trade is probably the best monetary decision. But
I assume they're very thick issues, right?
I mean, and there's just so much to it. We talked about letters pages and extra stuff in the back. One of the things I like about that, well, I'm jumping ahead. I should explain. The Black Monday, I don't even know if I can explain, actually. I've tried to explain this book 2 or 3 times now, and I don't know if I can do it. I took some notes here. Let me just read from this, and maybe that will be enough. Murder, money, magic, wealth, real wealth is paid for in blood, and there are those who sit in seats of power. One of those people are murdered, and that's what starts this book out, which starts an investigation by this very group as to who did what, and by a police detective who glimpses this other world. And they talk. Well, on the very back cover, it says, "All hail God Mammon." And so there are some very old powers in play having to do with money and influence by a certain few. I mean, it's an allegory for the 1%, as it were, right?
Right.
But it's Jonathan Hickman. So he's one of those creators where I see a book by him and I go, that's going to be interesting. whether or not I like it remains to be seen. But in general, I'm talking about not this book in particular, but he he certainly makes you think. He certainly does not pander. He does not give you all the clues. He does not explain over much. And I love that. I don't like being spoon-fed everything all the time. There are some things I don't mind, but this stuff just fascinates me. It infuriates me at the same time. You know, just the blatant disregard for humanity that some of these characters have. Some of the situations in here that are described are just atrocious, and yet it's kind of like a wreck on the side of the road. You're driving by and you can't help but just watch as you're passing by. It's very much like that for me. But this book, not only does it tell an interesting story. I mean, I'll show some of the art here in the video for people who are not familiar with it. You know, it's good. Look, I'm showing a panel, a splash page of this guy who threw himself out of a building, and look at the expression on his face. Who's the sheer terror. What's that?
Who's the artist again?
That is Tom Coker, who's the primary artist on this.
And there's a colorist.
That is by Michael Garland.
Okay, I haven't heard of that color.
So
it look like a good color.
Well, and you know, it's a lot of darker or muted colors. You know, there's a lot of browns in here. There's a lot of blacks.
Right.
In fact, I think depending on who the main characters are in the scene, that may influence the colors. I just kind of noticed that at the moment. I don't know how accurate that is. But you also get things like this, Damien, where it's an excerpt from a report that's been redacted. I'm showing this on the screen here.
Right.
You know, there's that. There are reprints of or reproductions of newspaper articles. One of the issues features diary entries from one of the characters. So you get a full. Well, full is not the right word. You get a lot of interesting material thrown your way. It's not just your typical comic panels again, going back to the Kill or Be Killed discussion.
But unlike Kill or Be Killed, those are like materials, like you have a dossier or something and you're flipping through it, or that's my impression from what you're showing.
Yeah. It's supplementary material thrown in the book. It may not necessarily be diegetic in the sense that it continues from something that happened on the previous page.
Right.
But
can you come back and read those bits later if you want?
Yeah, and I typically do. I kind of when I come across that stuff, I kind of just go, okay, I see what this is, but I'll come back to it and read the entire thing so that I'm not missing something. But I get the gist of it and move on. But then, like I said, I go back to it. There's also it's on the back cover. I'll show it again. You see that symbol there with the sort of half, or a incomplete circle with the dots.
Right.
So there's a symbolic language that's introduced in this book, and it's not just for graphic on the page for graphic's sake. It's actually part of the language of this, the otherworldly aspect of it. Oh, here we go. Here's a page showing a bunch of the symbols and what they mean.
Oh, they actually give you the meanings of them
for these particular ones. But there is a character in here.
And one of them was redacted, I saw.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in this. So, which is kind of infuriating. But one of the characters here, let me find that scene real quick. One of the characters is she's now albino. She's drawn in white. Every scene that we see her in. And not only that, I'm trying to find a good picture of her. Not only do you see her in the background, she's like a constant companion to one of the main characters in the book, but then in issue 4, you see her throughout time coupled with other characters that are involved with these families and this line of succession having to do with the seats of power. And so I'm sorry, I cannot find. Oh, here we go. Found it. Okay. So I can't remember what's her name. I have it written down here. This is good radio. Good podcasting. Abby. Abby is the character's name. There's a scene here with Abby and the one of the main characters, and it involves the succession of power from the main characters whose name I cannot remember at the moment. Her father, the power transfers from her father to her because the power eats their own. And there's this disturbing scene in here where the main character, after having this conversation with her father, late one night, she hears this crunch, 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 crunch sound. And she goes downstairs and finds Abby chowing down on, actually, I think it's her grandfather. And she freaks out. But then Abby says something to her, and I don't know if you can see that, Damien. Abby is talking with that symbology,
right?
And that one panel in the middle. And so the main character here can understand that, obviously, and she says yes. And then Abby becomes her companion from then on. You can see them together in this scene, in this funeral scene. So it's really weird. It's really weird, but so interesting. I don't know where this is going. I have a little problem, sort of, that it's $5. But I feel like I'm getting a lot out of it. There's so many characters. There's so much. Again, there's a lot of mystery to it. That we can, I think we can mine, or Hickman and company can mine for quite a while, and still entertain us.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like something that would be either really great or really horrible. And obviously it's turning out great.
For me, yes. I would agree with you.
You know what I mean? Because it could just be this total mess of black magic and conspiracy that, is just stupid.
Yeah.
But it sounds really cool. I'm really looking forward to getting it in trade now.
Yeah. I think a lesser writer, perhaps, that would be a fear that would happen. But I have a lot of faith in Mr. Hickman and the team that he has on this book.
With his indie books, does he have a good track record in finishing them up?
Well, I think a lot of his indie. So he has what does he have out right now? East of West is one that's still going on. There's another one that I'm blanking on.
Something about the dead and the dying, and I haven't heard about that recently.
Yeah.
And then there were the Manhattan Projects, and I don't know if that wrapped up.
That's the one I'm thinking of. I think that's on hiatus. I could be wrong. But his other works, his other indie works, tend to be shorter or have been shorter. The ones he did before he went to work for Marvel.
Right. He did like 4-issue books and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I'm just wondering if he's finished any of these big epics that he's started since his current. Not that I'm totally doubting, but I just a long time reader of these things. Sometimes they just never get completed.
Well, and
he's starting to wonder if he's still working on East of West, because I haven't heard people mention it. Okay. And I'm collecting that in hardback, so it's for me, I'm far behind.
Well, he has another book coming out called, and it's mentioned in here in the back of issue 4 of the Black Monday Murders, but it's called Frontier, and it's all
that one he's drawing himself. Is that one?
He's doing the majority of the work on this one. Yeah.
Right.
So. Yeah, that's a good point, Damien. I don't know. Now that you mentioned that, for the ones that he has started that are still, quote unquote ongoing, they haven't ended. So yeah, you're right. We don't know what his track record is for ongoing creator-owned series.
The reason that pops into my mind is because they're so complex and big. If they don't have endings, they just sort of imply the need for an ending more than
some things. I think if Black Hammer never really ended, it would be a mild annoyance.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Maybe his books don't need to have endings either, but I just sort of imagine they do.
I don't know. I can totally see this book in particular, Black Monday Murders, not continuing on for years and years and years. I'm pretty sure. Plus, I think Hickman. My impression of Hickman is that he likes to tell finite stories. It's just that some of them, like East of West, is taking years for whatever reason. We can't just lay it on at his feet that that hasn't ended or we haven't had an issue in a while. The artists sometimes need breaks or have to do other things. And
he has successfully ended epics that he did at Marvel. I was just thinking that my vague impression is that Manhattan Projects is still out there dangling a bit, but I haven't read all the trades, so I haven't caught up to know if maybe he did wrap that up and I just didn't realize it. And it sounded like East and West has kind of slowed down, and there was this Dead and Dying one that I haven't heard about recently that he started a year or two ago.
Now, did that ever come out?
See in the long run what he does.
Did Dead and the Dying actually come out, or was it just talked about?
A few issues came out.
Okay, I don't remember that. Obviously, I did not pick that one up. I think you're right, because I think I was waiting for the trade on that one for some reason.
Right.
But Black Monday Murders was an interested me enough. Frontier is the same way. I'm going to be getting that as well.
When you and I saw him at Rose City Comic Con, we both agreed he was one of the best panels we went to. So he is a very impressive fellow, and I do sort of believe he will figure it out eventually. But
yeah,
Dying and the Dead, it was called. I'm looking on Comixology now.
Okay. And Terrence says it's been a long time. The first 2 issues did. It was great.
There's been 3 issues of The Dying of the Dead.
Okay.
Maybe that concluded it. I don't know, because I didn't read it. I was just waiting for the trade. And the last issue came out September 2015.
Oh, wow. I kind of doubt that Hickman would only do 3 issues of a story. It doesn't seem like his style.
Right.
I think he wants much longer runs for a story that he's telling.
And it might not be his fault. It might be something happened to the artist. And in these indie books, they have to wait for the artist. They don't just switch to a different artist easily.
Yeah.
But that's a long time ago for issue 3 to have come out and nothing more heard from it. So I might look into that more just because I'm curious. I think I started East of West as single books, and I read the first 3 issues, and I just wasn't getting into it enough. And then I dropped it, and when it continued, I heard people saying how great it was, so I picked up the 15-issue hardback, and that was very satisfying.
Okay, yeah, and
that's when I decided to just follow him in trades.
Yeah, I did. I got those first 15 or so issues of East of West too, and basically when they broke off for a short break, I stopped getting it. But that had nothing to do with the quality of the book, because that was a really interesting story. Again, Hickman and the artist that he works with create such interesting worlds, not just in terms of the the world building that Hickman is doing through his writing, but what the artists do visually to depict that world are just he does a really good job at pairing up with somebody to tell a really interesting story.
Right. He finds really good artists, that I have not heard of before, but turn out to be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Terrence says in one of the issues he mentions that he mentioned that he had a lot on his plate and it was going to be taking a break.
Which one, East or West?
I'm not sure. I think maybe he was talking about The Dying and the Dead. I don't know. And Jack said the same artist on Secret and The Dying and the Dead, I think.
Huh. So, I mean, already the Black Monday Murders has gone more issues than The Dying of the Dead. So it's showing good signs of continuing.
Yeah. I think that's it that I have as far as, that's it. That's all I have about the Black Monday murders that I wanted to say. So what is your number one, Damien?
My number one, dun, 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 dun. So my number one is, I think, something you don't read. It is Kaiju Max, written and drawn by Zander Cannon from Oni Press. He puts out 6 issues a year, and he calls it a season. And it is very much like a TV show. It's like, maybe I'm kind of clued. I don't know if everyone knows kaiju are the name for the giant monsters in Japanese movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so in his world, there is a island of monsters, but rather than just a regular island of monsters, the island is a prison for monsters run by humans who have suits that can turn them into giant robots so that they can manage the monsters. It's shaped like an episodic TV show that takes place inside the prison. So the first season takes place entirely inside the prison. And the second season, while remaining connected to the prison. So the first season was 2015. The second season was 2016. This explores more the life of the monsters outside of the prison, like monsters on parole and monsters that are hiding in the depths. There's these Cthulhu monsters hiding in the depths of the ocean that run whorehouses. And so it mixes the genres of monsters and prison movies and criminals. And that sounds like just a gimmick, but Zander Cannon just nails it in every issue. Every issue is so dense with exciting, cool stuff, new ideas, drama. It's very dark black humor, even though it's done in this kind of cartoony style. This is Electrogore, who's looking for his children. He escapes from prison and looks for his children. And the damn humans who didn't like the fact that he was stealing electricity from power plants or something, put him in prison, and then no one was there to feed his children. And so the tragic ending of this second issue is where where we find out what happened to his children, and he's reunited with them. But it's this horrible reuniting which ends in terrible tragedy. So it's really hard to describe, and I really love it. And again, it's something that probably doesn't work for everybody, but it's much better than it sounds. And I've given the first trade to a couple of people now, and maybe I'll send you one.
Well, I was just going to say, I think you talked about this in one of your other videos that I watched recently, and I'm thinking already, Damien, that you're 2 for 2. I'm going to be picking up the trade of that, and it's not just what you've said about it. I've heard other people talking about this book. Now you said this is season 2. Do you know when the first volume came out?
The first volume came out. They're kind of, for this, they're following a image kind of pattern, and the first volume comes out as soon as the hiatus happens.
But I mean,
so the first volume came out at the beginning of 2016, and then season 2 happened immediately thereafter.
So the original issues came out in 2015. Is that right?
Right. So the first 6 issues came out in 2015. The volume came out. It was only $10. And now that they followed the image $10 first trade pattern. And now the second season has just ended, and the trade will be coming out soon. And then in a month or two, I think the third season will start up.
Okay.
You could start on the second season. I think the second season was even better than the first, and you could even read individual issues, although I would recommend reading it by the season at least. Mm-hmm. So you could probably individual issues if you wanted when it starts up again sometime in 2017. But, I gave the first trade to Matt, I was going to call him Agent 42Q, his old name, from Wednesday Serial, who you know. Mm-hmm. And Matt did not love it as much as I did. So
And I think part of the problem was his reading it in trade. He kind of shotgunned the whole trade. And I think it paces out better if you read it kind of episode by episode and have a bit of time between episodes.
Interesting.
If that makes sense. So when he shotgunned the whole first trade, he didn't read it as a comedy the way I read it as a very black comedy about crime and monsters. And so if you don't see it as a black comedy, it's just a very depressing comic about giant monsters who are criminals.
So do you read this as an allegory for incarceration?
Partially. But I think it's not one that I can say, oh, this is an allegory for this, or like I can't take it apart the way I can take apart Black Hammer and see. I can't figure out why I like it so much. I do love giant monsters, and I've almost always been disappointed by every giant monster movie I've seen, but I still kind of love the idea of giant monsters. And I guess King Kong was a very good one. I love the idea of Godzilla, but most Godzilla movies have way too many flaws.
Oh yeah, they suck.
But I still am fascinated by them. And so this really is satisfying on that level. But again, it's all about life problems. I mean, but life problems that are way worse than mine, And maybe, if you were to look at the lives of criminals or people, criminals, because one of the questions in here are these giant monsters criminals? They're being turned into, and they form this kind of criminal culture amongst themselves, centered around prison and being kind of an underworld where they have to prostitute themselves because they don't have other options, or that kind of thing.
Wow.
But it's not done so seriously that you have to say, oh boy, I feel really sorry for the downtrodden masses who have to become prostitutes. You know what I mean? It's too abstracted from that. But it's definitely connected to that. And, the difficult choices that someone who's on parole is faced with and all of that kind of thing.
Well, again, Damien, you have sold me on this book. I think you really should write the marketing copy for these guys.
Oni Press, you're here in Portland. You can give me a job. I'll be your PR person. I love it when indie comics, commercial comics have to have an ad on the back cover. An indie comic can choose to have a full picture that spreads from the front cover to the back cover. Kaiju Max always has that. I'm trying to think of any of the other ones we've looked at have that, but I really enjoy that on Kaiju Max books. Unfortunately, Black Hammer, has an ad on the back. Autumnlands has quotes from inside on the back. And you were showing stuff on the back of Black Monday Murders. Saga always just has a blank back cover. But one of the nice things about indie comics is they aren't part of this formula that has to be followed on how you publish comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I was just looking through mine, and you showed Saga just having a black cover. Killer Be Killed is similar, but it has the cover credits on here with the barcode.
And there's a certain design quality to that blank back cover.
But here's another image comic that I have, which is my number one, but I won't show you. It just has an ad on the back. Right. So I think it depends on
whether they want ads.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they at least some of them might have to, or some books might have to have ads to supplement the production costs.
Right, and the creators are kind of getting to decide how they will balance these things out. I think when I worry about Hickman finishing books, I think that can be the downside. There's no editor saying, okay, where's the script for next month? That procrastination can set in when you don't have an editor.
Yeah.
But on the other hand,
the not having someone say, this is the way comic books are done and they have to be done this way is really nice. So Jonathan Hickman can throw whatever he wants into Black Monday Murders.
Mm-hmm.
And no one can criticize Phillips and Brubaker if they decide not to use word balloons on some pages and just put text on one side.
Yeah. So
Xander Cannon, for the first season, did a podcast to go with each issue.
Ooh.
Where he talked about all the influences and ideas that went into it.
Wow. Thank you for that.
I think he must have run out of steam, but he was planning to do more podcasts.
I will be listening to that once I get the first trade.
Listen to the podcast. Kind of exciting. It's like the DVD director's commentary, I suppose.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
And Xander is very, in his letters page, very interactive with his fans, talking about kaiju and his influences and what he was thinking. He does think of this book as a comedy. But at one point, I don't think in these issues I have in front of me, people were sending in requests for kaiju that he could stick in. Actually, that might be one of them there, some little creature.
That's
People
cute.
would request something and then he would stick it in somewhere in the issues. So there's that level of interactivity with Kaiju Max that's very interesting too.
That is really cool. So, Damien, Terrence agrees with you that it's a
giant drum roll.
Well, before we get to that, Terrence agrees with you about it being a black comedy. And LaRasa said that when she started reading Kaiju Max, she felt it was very depressing.
It is depressing, but in a way that I enjoy for some reason.
Yeah. And then Terrence follows up with, if you think of kaiju movies as a commentary on the nuclear/war eras, which, yeah, I forgot about that aspect.
Yeah.
This book really fits fits as a commentary on prison systems, poverty, etc. So, yeah.
Right. And sort of that feeling of once you are misunderstood by society, you're screwed. Everything you do after that is going to be fit into that criminal, antisocial, and that you can't get out, that you're trapped. Once you're labeled a criminal, there's really no options out. Mm-hmm. At least now, see, I can't draw on personal experience to know if that's true or not. Most of my knowledge of criminal life, I do have one friend from high school who became a criminal. He literally called himself a criminal to me when we talked 30 years later. And after jail, he did sober up and has become a drug counselor. So there are roots out, at least for some people, in real life from the criminal life. I should touch base with him in a few years and see if it's worked for him.
Yeah. Well, now I'm also
That's
intrigued.
A whole another story, but it suddenly made me think of it because he apparently spent most of. I hadn't seen him since 1981. So from 1981 till maybe 2012, he spent his life in crime. He made his living from crime. So anyway, I should make a comic book about his life, or what he claims to me as his life. That's the other question: what's truth and what isn't?
Right. Well, it also occurred to me too. Like I said, I'm gonna get the first volume and check it out. But now I want to compare it in my mind, at least, to what was the other book that is about Bitch Planet. So you get the two different takes on what prison life is and why people are incarcerated. What does that mean for the society that's depicted? So I'm gonna have to remember to check that out after I read volume 1 of Kaiju Max.
Are you following Bitch Planet in singles?
I got and read the first trade, and that's as far as I've gotten so far.
Because I think I read the first 3 or 4 singles in that and kind of faded away on it. Mm-hmm. I may pick it up in trades someday. I'm not sure. It's so different from Kaiju Max. I hadn't even thought about it, but they are both in prison. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. I mean, completely different stories, I think. But anyway. All right. My number one. Shall we move on to that?
Very interested.
So, well, I don't know how interesting it'll be because if anybody has paid attention on my podcast, and maybe even on some of the videos I've done, this book has consistently risen to the top of my lists. Like my favorites of the year lists. I talk about it pretty much to anybody who asks these kinds of questions to me or of me. My number one favorite indie book, and has been for essentially the last 3 years, is Lazarus. So this is a book that came out in 2013 from Image. It's by Greg Rucka, Michael Lark. Let's see here. I got to look at my list. Tyler Boss, Santi Arcus, Jody Wynn, and Eric Troutman, who does a lot of the design aspects of the book. So when they have to design logos and weaponry and whatnot, or even just kind of like if you see stuff on electronic screens in the background, Eric Troutman is the one that's doing that kind of stuff for him. So which is really cool. So for those who may not know, Lazarus is a near future story about basically the world has collapsed into an oligarchy. So the world is run by families who own power. They own all the power in the world. So a lot of the United States, or at least the western half of the United States, is run by the Carlyle family, whose Lazarus is shown here. And each family has its a representative, a protector, a gladiator, basically, and that's the Lazarus here. And it's about her starting to figure out what and who she really is in this world in which I mentioned the 1%. In regards to the Black Monday murders, it's a very similar idea here in the Lazarus world, because those with money and those who either belong to the family or are favored by the family are really well off. Everybody else, not so great in this world. And they are referred to actually there are basically three classes. One is basically the family. The other class is essentially what you could think of as the middle class, and they're the serfs, and the lower class folks in this world are called the waste. So you can get a sense of what what life might be like if you're waste in this world, and it's not pretty.
And almost everyone is the waste, right?
Pretty much, yeah. The majority of the people are the waste.
The vast population, the waste.
Yeah. So it's a really fascinating world that Rucka and Lark and everybody has come up with. Rucka talked a lot about in the letters pages over several issues, and in interviews that I read about the book, where he's extrapolating a lot of stuff based on current socioeconomic and political goings on, right now. So he sees that possibly, a possible future would be that certain wealthy people would come to power and basically run things. And
talk about depressing comic books, I have to say.
I know, right? It from that perspective, it sounds really depressing. And there are some pretty effective stories in here regarding some of the serfs and some of the waste characters that's in here that are very depressing is the right word, but it's still fascinating for me, because I like a lot of I like future or near future stories. I don't particularly care for dystopian futures. As I get older, I don't care to be depressed about my future or about the world.
I have found that to be very true about getting older.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, Damien, when you're younger, did you find dystopian futures fascinating?
Yeah, I mean, I was much more into reading 1984 and watching the movie Brazil and all these other depressing visions and being bitter and upset about mankind, but somehow feeling my future would still be bright.
Right. And now that we're older and we see what's going on, I don't care to be reminded of that.
It's too real.
Yeah, it's too real.
Well, I read the first 10 or 11 issues of Lazarus. And I think I was particularly going through a period where I was worrying about the future world that my daughter would live in.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't keep reading Lazarus. I hope to come back to it someday, but at the time, enjoying the depressingness of Kaiju Max, but at the time it was just too, I could imagine this world coming and it was too depressing to me and I just wanted a break from it.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally see
but
that.
It also has fantastic art and fantastic color and everything. Yeah. Michael Lark is really perfect for this book.
Yeah, it's been it's a very beautiful book, beautifully done. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, here's just a random scene here of them driving through the desert. I mean, just look at the backgrounds of that scene. Yeah.
It looks just awesome. Really well done. It has incredible storytelling to the progression of the images and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I'm talking a lot about the world building, and how depressing it can be.
Right.
But there's a very personal story here through the eyes of the Lazarus of the story, and her name is Forever. She goes by Forever. They call her Forever.
Right. Forever Carlyle, right?
Yes.
She's part of the Carlyle family who rules some portion of the United States.
Yeah. In fact, right? our portion of the United States, Damien. Uh-huh. In fact, we live in the here, if I can find it real quick. Oh, the Pacific Northwest domain. So I'll just talk about this since I have it right.
We are probably waste, right?
Yeah, I probably would be. Anyway, so here's Lazarus, the source book, volume 1, Carlyle, and they came out with this. I don't know, some months ago. I've been meaning to talk about it for a while, but it's. Okay, let me back up for a second. I love source book material. You know, I have a ton of like Star Trek source books. You know,
yes, I just listened to your Star Trek podcast.
Oh, right, yeah, I did mention that, didn't I?
I really like to know IDW Star Trek to be your number one indie, but
well, that's true. That was really close to being on my list, Damien. The new Star Trek book. But I really like that stuff. I really like getting into the world, into the technology, the background of this world that I'm reading about. And the source book here, gave us, like I said, I showed. Well, if I can find, do they show a whole map of the darn place? Here we go. You can see color-coded map of the United States, and shows the families and who runs what.
What's the black part? Is that like just a dead zone?
The black part is, it doesn't say.
Huh.
I think maybe that is a no man's land. So I think something happened that we haven't been told about explicitly in the book that caused these families to come to power. And I think maybe that happened in the East.
I mean, I love these kinds of source books and encyclopedia-ish kind of things about comics or storyline, fictional places. So that sounds really cool. I didn't realize Lazarus had put out one. Are you happy with the source book? Does it have other cool stuff?
Oh yeah. I mean, not only does it have the maps and backgrounds and stuff, you can see some diagrams here of the helicopters and the weaponry. I'm sure Troutman had a field day with this stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I know, I love it. And not only that, so you have a great story here, a great world that's being built up. But then you get, we talked a lot about back matter in other books. This is no different in the sense that it provides more information, but the letters pages are many usually. And they also include, like you can see here in this image, there's this timeline running down the one side of the page. And this goes on for several pages of this letter. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of, well, this is letters and commentary from Rucka, and the timeline continues, and that's just one book. The other other issues have, well, here's not only do you have letters pages, but then you have, like I mentioned, logos and stuff. So you get background information about this world, but it's not directly related necessarily to what's going on in that particular issue. But it helps build the world.
Right. So it's the classic where you do a lot of world building.
Yes. And then here, one more thing I want to show. What was this one? Oh yeah. And every once in a while they'll do these. I guess if they have spots to fill on the letters page. So this is an in-world posting from this character named Sari Cooper. And so it's just, she's part of this news organization, and she provides some background, or she gives a news report essentially commenting on what's going on, and you get that a lot actually. And then finally, on the back here, this is the back cover. We were talking about ads on the back cover. This is not an ad. Well, it is an ad, but it's an in-world ad.
So it's an ad that's part of the fictional world.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So
if you look at it quickly, you think you're looking at a regular comic book ad, and then you read it and you realize this applies to what I'm reading in my comic.
Yeah. I absolutely love
I love that idea.
The edge stuff, the stuff that's on the edges of this book, that, I mean, not literally, but the stuff that helps build up this world and these characters and the situations. If you're willing to read it. Now, you don't have to. If you ignore all this stuff that I've been pointing out, this is still a very rich and rewarding story to experience.
Right. Well, you've definitely done a good job of selling me on this too. I mean, I already knew it was good because I read the early issues, but I sort of pushed it out of my mind. I think from after hearing you talk about it, I think this would be one I would enjoy once I get past the depressingness of it, to collect in those deluxe hardbacks, which I think they are putting it out in things.
Yeah, I would totally recommend anybody who has not picked this up to do so, and especially in trade, because then you could get a nice sit down and read copy and read through the whole issues. Whereas I read it monthly or whenever it comes out. It's not always monthly, but because they take breaks too, just like other indie comics do. Right. And so I have to wait to read the next issue. And like I said, it's been one of my favorite comics since it came out, about 3 years ago. Continues to be a great read.
What issue are they?
It's good comics. The latest I have is 25.
So I wonder if they're getting to the point where they also suffer from not so many people talking about them anymore, just because they're a good, solid comic that has continued to come out on a steady basis.
Possibly. I certainly do my best, especially on this book for some reason, to promote it.
In the comments, Samuel Trejo has said, like the ads in Renato Jones. I don't know if you've seen Renato Jones, but that's an interesting kind of Frank Miller-ish attack on the 1%, where Renato Jones is one of the 1%, but he goes around killing them. And in it are ads for the 1%, ads aimed at the 1%, like special colognes and other things that only the 1% would want. So that's an interesting comic. I wouldn't list Renato Jones. I think it's called Renato Jones and the 1% or something like that. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite indies, but it's definitely kind of an interesting indie since Sam brought it up, and we seem to keep talking about the 1% in one way or another.
It seems to be a recurring theme, doesn't it?
One recurring theme of each one of these comics is so unique, and it's so wonderful that we live in a time with so many unique comics coming out. And they aren't underground comics. I mean, they're getting wide distribution. You can find them in bookstores, and you can find them at comic book stores.
And you can get them digitally, of course. So there's just a lot of opportunity to read really good comics. You don't have to, search the most obscure corners of this country to find them. Which is why I kind of think of this as a golden age of indie comics right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Just looking at my pull list real quick here. I am reading just as many indie titles, whether it's in single issues or some of them I get in trades, as I am DC books. And DC is my, for mainstream, that's my company that I prefer. So the fact that I'm reading so many independent books, whereas, 15, 20, 25 years ago, I barely read any. Of course, back then there weren't as many, Image was just getting started about that time. And
when Image started, indie books were basically, their indie books anyway, were just more superhero books.
Yeah, exactly. So like you said, underground comics were kind of the indie scene when we were there.
Except in the Comics Underground, which is, like I was saying, Comics Underground produced some good stuff, but it was very hard to find.
Yeah.
And usually those magazines didn't survive very long.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? There's, and I think it also tells you how good they are that even though we're longtime superhero readers, we're making room for them in our reading lists. Because they're so good, we're distracted from superheroes at times and read other stuff.
Well, independent comics seem to be the place that I can go mostly for non-superhero stories, and not just non-superhero stories, but really rich and engaging stories.
Right.
That's not to say that some superhero books that I read from the big two aren't engaging and interesting, but they're not in the same way that I'm getting like Lazarus or Black Hammer,
right,
or Black Monday Murders for that matter.
And the superhero books, the mainstream superhero books anyway, they represent a long-term group effort, which is fascinating to see as it changes over the years and everything. Whereas these ones talked about represent an individual vision or the vision of two people at most, maybe three, and they stick with that. They don't, keep changing. And so that makes them fascinating. A Jonathan Hickman comic is nothing like a Zander Cannon comic. And it's not like one is going to take the other one over and change it, reboot it or something.
Right. Right.
I think things like Batman are fascinating, on the other end of the spectrum for just seeing how different people handle it over the years. But these are the individual visions. And also, I'm really glad now that, if you aren't someone who would be drawn to superheroes, you could have a whole life of reading comics without having to worry about superheroes. And there's lots of great stuff now. Yeah. And that just really wasn't the case when we started reading comics.
No, definitely not.
So it just broadens the art form out to more readers and to readers like us who can read all kinds of different things. Gives us so much more to choose from. Can I, do you want to wrap up there or?
Well, I was just, yeah. Is there, one more question, I guess, were there any others that you just want to mention just real quick that didn't quite make the list? Yeah, let's give a few.
There was a mini series last year, a 4-issue series from Black Mask Comics called Space Riders. And now they're coming back with a new 4-issue, I think it's 4-issue mini coming up called Space Riders Brutal Galaxy, I think is the title. So it's totally, B-movie homage, like a B-movie motorcycle comic in outer space. But I just loved it, and I'm so excited that that's coming up. So I wanted to mention that.
Okay.
And then ones that, when I was playing around with my list, other ones that I wrote down were Jupiter's Legacy.
Yeah.
By Mark Millar and I love that artist, and suddenly I can't remember his name.
Chris Burnham.
No, Quietly, Frank Quietly.
Quietly, yeah.
They're very similar artists, but yeah. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to put Jupiter's Legacy on the list, but it hasn't come out. An issue hasn't come out in a while, and I just had to cut something, so I cut it.
Did you read? So there's Jupiter's Legacy and there's Jupiter's Circle.
Right, and currently running is Jupiter's Legacy Volume 2.
Right.
So that's what I'm really referring to.
Okay.
I haven't read Jupiter's Circle yet, which is by a different artist.
Okay, so I highly recommend, Damien, if you like Jupiter's Legacy, you like that story. I think that Jupiter's Circle is actually in some ways better.
Oh, okay. Well, that's exciting. I actually have the trades sitting around, the 2 trades waiting to be read.
Yeah, then you should enjoy that.
I love Frank Quietly's art, and I think he elevates a script that is a perfectly good script, but turns it into something even better.
Yes.
With his artwork and the way he portrays characters. Mm-hmm. And then deserves a mention from me, and just recently wrapped up The House of Penance with this incredible artwork by Ian Bertram, and Lady Killer.
Ah, yes.
But if Lady Killer 2, Lady Killer Volume 2, it's called Lady Killer 2. And I haven't seen issues of that in a few months, so I'm not sure what's up with that. And Birthright is also a big favorite of mine from Image Comics, a fantasy book.
Okay.
And then Gru. Gru just wrapped up a miniseries last week called Gru Fray of the Gods. And I thought it was awesome. And Gru has been around forever, but it's still done incredibly well by Sergio Aragonés and Mark Evanier, I guess is his name, Mark Evanier. So I really always love it when a new Gru miniseries comes out. How about you? Do you have some also Rands in your head?
Let's see. Black Magic. Did you read that one?
No, I was going to read it in trade though.
Ah, yeah. Well, and you can. Really yes. So this is by Greg Rucka as well, and Nicholas Scott.
Right.
It's on hiatus because they're currently working on Wonder Woman, but those first, I think it was 5 issues that they came out with for that first trade. Just lovely to look at. Interesting story. Again, touching on Black Magic. Magic seems to come up a lot in comic books. Let's see here. What else? I mentioned Morning Glories just briefly. I've been getting that in trade, and I kind of like Black Monday Murders. I have a hard time describing what that book's about, but it's if you know the TV show Lost. It's the comic book version of that, set in a sort of a preparatory school type situation. It's bizarre, and it features time travel. And anyway, I dig it. It's not. I can understand people probably not liking it. If you did not like Lost, you probably won't like this book. But I think it's a lot of fun. And Star Trek, the IDW Star Trek series, it's a licensed property book, but it's been such a surprise to me because I normally don't like, even though I love Star Trek to death. I really haven't gotten into the previous versions of Star Trek comics that much. I mean, I read some and I enjoyed them, but this IDW series that started after the 2009 Star Trek film reboot has just been a surprising delight for me.
And that should serve as an ad for everyone to go back and listen to the last podcast or second to last podcast. I'm not sure which, where you very thoroughly Star Trek is.
Yeah. My episode 109 of the podcast. I talked about my love for that property. So if you like Star Trek and you could stand me talking about Star Trek for 2 hours, go listen to that.
I thought I would be bored, but I was fascinated. It was a great episode.
I thought I'd be bored.
And I'm not even trying to get invited back.
So I'm going to have to put that in the marketing for that episode, Damien. Now, final question before we get out of here, Damon. Are there any indie books that you're aware of that you're excited to read that haven't come out yet?
Well, I cheated because I already mentioned Space Riders. I can't think of, other than that, what's coming up. Well, in our comments, Samuel Trejo has mentioned Headlopper, which ended. But I think there's going to be another Headlopper series coming up, so I'm kind of psyched for that. Headlopper was kind of like Conan meets Adventure Time. But that's
an interesting way.
Kind of reductive. It was better than that sounds, but it was takes place in a kind of a fantasy Conan-like world, but done with a sense of humor and in a cartoony style. Maybe a little bit like Gru too, but not really. Gru relies very heavily on the humor and not much else. But anyway, Headlopper is one that I'm looking forward to coming back. I feel like my plate is kind of full. It's hard to find room for more indie comics or more comics in general.
Well, that's always the eternal question: is how much money can you spend and how much time do you have? But which is a much better situation than not having enough money or time to read the comics, or worse. Back when we were younger, there weren't as many. There simply weren't as many comics out.
Very true.
So yeah.
Now I'm in the position where I could buy a lot more than I can have time to read. That seems another curse of adulthood.
Yes, I find myself in the same.
You can afford a lot more, but where's the time?
Yes, as I look at my stack of comics from the last 2 weeks over here, waiting to be read. There were a couple things that I wanted to mention that I'm looking forward to reading. I already mentioned this one just briefly, but Frontier. That's the new Jonathan Hickman book.
The new Hickman.
Yeah, so he described that as basically a dark Star Trek, and so I thought, well, that should be interesting. Whether it's good or not,
It's funny because as soon as I heard the word Frontier, I thought Final.
Uh-huh.
The Final.
I'm sure that was not an accident on his part. Yeah. And then finally, there is a new book from Greg Rucka. And Leandro Fernandez called The Old Guard that I'm really looking forward to reading. This is from Image Comics.
Yeah, I mean, there's some Image Comics that I bought but haven't read yet. Like I got one called God Country, and I think I'll be getting The Few coming in, but I just don't know yet. I just thought I'd try them, and I just don't know yet whether I'll like them or not.
And we have,
I guess, to talk about a really indie, there's someone I've discovered who self-publishes his own comic. I met him on Twitter, and I've been really enjoying his comic book series called Antique. So I've got the first 2 issues, and the 3rd issue is out, and the 4th issue, I think, is the final issue is coming pretty soon. So I might get the last 2 issues together. And he self-publishes it, and most self-published comics that I've read, I'm really finding myself getting into this and finding it's a fantasy story about an old woman who has a valuable magic sword sent on a mission by the owner of a pawn shop where she tries to pawn the sword. So it's a very fun comic to read. And I can imagine this fellow, his name is Matt Lizniewski. I can imagine that I'll see him at Image someday if he keeps at it.
And you talked about this at some length on one of your more recent episodes, right?
True, I did. I think one of my comic book thoughts review shows, I might have reviewed the first issue or maybe the second issue also. I can't remember. I think on Twitter I've shown images from this second issue that I liked.
Samuel in the chat says that I think Daniel Warren Johnson's new book deserves a mention. It's called Extremity. I don't think I've heard of that one.
I have not heard of that one either.
And Jared also says that he got the latest issue of East of West just a couple weeks ago. And Manhattan Projects ended and then relaunched with Manhattan Project Sun Beyond the Stars, which then ended. And
okay. So maybe he's concluded that, and I maligned him by suggesting that Manhattan Project is not finished.
Well, Jared also says there will be more Manhattan Project series. So maybe he's going more to a shorter publishing plan for specific stories he wants to tell.
And maybe that's a good way to go with indie comics, like with Xander Cannon doing seasons, since it is hard once you're on issue 30 or 40 for people to still be paying attention, to do a miniseries, stop, then come back to another miniseries. And a lot of these, I think, sell better in trade than in single issues anyway.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Okay. I think we've talked about everything we intended to talk about, Damien, and then some.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. Unless you have anything else, we could probably go ahead and do our goodbyes.
Yeah. No, I think we've covered it all.
All right. Well, I thank you so much, Damien, for joining me on this conversation. I have been, for those people won't know this, and so I'll just tell you, Damien and I have been planning this for weeks. In fact, it may even be now a month or 2
months
to get together. But
we've each had various problems that kept us from being free at the last minute.
But and Damien even said, don't at one point, he even said, "Don't worry about it. If you want to go talk about this stuff, go ahead. Don't worry about me." And I'm like, "No, I want to talk about this stuff with you." So I've been holding on to these notes, and I've had my comics out of my desk all this time, just waiting to have this talk. And again, thank you so much for joining me. I always enjoy talking comics with you. And you sold me on a few, so great job.
Well, I'm a great fan of the Long Box Review podcast, so it's always a thrill for me to actually be part of it. I'll probably listen to us on my commute to work in a few weeks and say, "Oh, did I say that?"
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned that, why don't you, for those that maybe catching this on YouTube, or definitely for the folks that listen to the podcast in the audio feed, why don't you remind everybody where they can find your great comic book podcast or comic book show on YouTube?
My videos, my vlogs, basically, are at Sleepy Reader 666 on YouTube. I think there's about 370 videos.
Wow.
I'd recommend looking for the ones that I actually call sleepy vlogs. Those are usually the ones that won't have aged as badly as some of the others. But anyway, or just sub me and get my whatever latest thing I throw out there, if you care to.
And I highly recommend people do subscribe and watch Damien as he talks about these books. He has a interesting viewpoint and always brings up some really cool things about the books he's reading. So please do that. And if you have any comments you would like to make about this particular show, this episode, because like I said, it's on YouTube, but I'm going to put it into my podcast feed. You can always do that by leaving comments below the video on YouTube, or if you're listening to the audio version, you can go to longboxreview.com and leave comments there. You can also email me, say that 5 times fast, at longboxreview@gmail.com. And you can also hit me up on Twitter. I'm always checking Twitter and always glad to comments or reply to comments there as well. And Damien, you're on Twitter as well, right?
Yep. Sleepy Reader 666.
Yep.
At Sleepy Reader 666 on Twitter.
It's good to have the same moniker everywhere.
And I basically use my Twitter feed to talk about comics. I try to avoid most other subjects. Occasionally bash Trump, but try to resist that.
All right. Well, like I said, Damien, thank you so much. I enjoy this conversation very much, and I look forward to our next talk.
That will be great.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks for listening in the future. Everybody take care. Go read some comics. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.